Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up and welcome in. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am your host, Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav. You can do your part in this enterprise. Scroll on over, hit those like and subscribe buttons. And he is the captain of our ship. He is a stat correction away from finally being the bride this weekend. But still, his losses are better than any of our hits. He is MC Holland34 on Twitter. He is Mr. Mike Holland. Mike, welcome in. How are you feeling about this Tuesday slate?
Now, man, I'm excited about this Tuesday slate. Anytime we see the prize pool tick up to 3,000, you know we've got a nice slate going. I'm sweating out a little prize pick today. Kind of took the day off. Just kind of enjoying some time at home. But yeah, we're talking about tomorrow's slate. I mean, it's a 7-gamer. Tips off at 6:30 Eastern, and yeah, I mean DK's got the big one out there, 3K. We typically usually see the 2K and the 1K out there. So anytime it gets that 3K, obviously there's not a lot going on a Tuesday evening. So this is when college basketball takes center stage, and yeah, I'm pumped. The slate could be a little more exciting. Some of these totals are pretty ugly and pretty rotten, but hey, it's a slate, right? So we'll take it.
I love that you're taking the wholesome track and pretending like you took a night off to like spend time with your family and everything, when we all know it's because the slate on DraftKings tonight was absolute garbage. It was like a 4-gamer. I think the highest total was like 119 points. There's no business jumping into those DFS streets today, but certainly greener pastures ahead of us on Tuesday. Right now, we're actually looking at a 3K to first tournament that you mentioned, and while there's not a lot of star power on this slate in particular, there are a couple of games that I think we should try to take advantage of. So first one that jumps off the page, opening game from the Jimmy V Classic up at the Garden. We got the Iowa Hawkeyes facing off against the number 15th ranked Blue Devils from Duke. Iowa's coming in, they're 6-1, and they're playing a pretty solid brand of basketball. 4th in offensive efficiency, 76th in defensive efficiency, 89th in tempo. So kind of all of the things that you look for in a team that can help pace up a game. So let's start off with these Hawkeyes.
Yeah, well, it didn't take long for Chris Murray to become the price king on a slate, right? He's all the way up to 9,000. Yeah, I remember when we were playing him at 5,600 on the second slate of the year. So that went by quickly, but that's because he just went 31-20 for 68 fantasy points last game. I missed that. I think I only had a few of them, so I didn't get the whole share of that. But yeah, that was good times, right? I mean, the guy's just taking on his own role with this team now that his brother's playing with the Kings. And yeah, I mean, the metrics are there now, right? His shot rate's at 30%. He can block shots, create some assists. So, I mean, he's got a lot of outs. This is a really tough slate. There is some value on this slate that we're going to talk about, though. So getting him in isn't going to be as hard as we think it's going to be. But I also look at the matchup, right? Like Dukes, we always talk about, they're pretty athletic. Especially that front line is super athletic with Filipowski and Lively. And then not to mention Dariq Whitehead's kind of coming along off of that injury. So he's in an interesting spot. I'm going to have some shares of him. I'm not hitting lock button or anything at 9K. He's really going to have to get to a 45. Now we just saw him go for 68, but I mean, more reasonable expectation, right, is a 40 to 45 with a really good game. So I don't mind it. You look at the rest of this roster, right, and it's kind of tough. I don't really like a whole lot of the guys at the top. Like Patrick McCaffrey, he's 7,200. I mean, he's been slumping in the last 2 games, but before that, his previous 2 games, he had 30-plus fantasy points. So, the price is just kind of ticking up. It's 7,200 now. I mean, it gives you a little bit of everything. He's still 25% second in usage rate, essentially, on this team. And, shot rate's okay. I mean, he gives you a little bit of rebounding, a little bit of assist, but that price just kind of takes out the upside for me. So, if I'm going to pay 7,200 for Patrick McCaffrey, I'm just going to figure out the 1,800 and play Chris Murray. Or I might have a share or two. Rabracha, right? He's 7,100. That price has come up. I liked playing him better when he was 6K. He's got to stay out of foul trouble. But, he can grab some rebounds. The shot rate's just not there. He's just not really used in this offense. So it's kind of a tough stealing, more of a cash play. But when you look at McCaffrey and Rebrachus, it's really tough to pay those price points for those guys. Now, where it gets interesting for the Hawkeyes is when you slide down a little bit lower, like Tony Perkins, 6,800. I don't think he's going to be used that much because of the price, but he finally got 33 minutes last game. And I mean, the guy has 30 to 35 fantasy point ceiling. I mean, the usage rate, 25%, shot rate, 24%, 25% assist rate, a 4% steal rate. So, he's someone, if you're going to play 33 to 35 minutes in this environment, which is projected to be the highest scoring game on the slate, he's someone that they can definitely look at. And then a lineup shift here, like Peyton Sandiford is now coming off the bench. I think he's going to be a player, but it's just taking him a little bit longer for him to realize that. And Aaron Eulis at 3,900 started last game. Now with Eulis, kind of gives Iowa that 2-guard look. I don't know how well that would work against Duke's backcourt. It feels like you probably need a little more size to play with Duke. But if they're going to start Eulis again at 3,900, right, like you're going to need value on the slate. And he pairs well with Murray at that 9K price tag. He's got a nice assist rate. It's 20%. Could get you a steal or two. 17% of the shots here, when he's on the floor. So gives you a little bit of usage. He's more dependent on obviously the assists and kind of like some rebounds falling his way, but you don't need to do much at 3,900. I think everyone's going to kind of look at Connor McCaffrey at that 4,600 and his flexibility for guard and forward. But man, talk about somebody that just has to have things go the right way. I mean, McCaffrey has an 11% usage rate and a 9% shot rate. So, I mean, he's that 6-man role. He played a pile of minutes last game, kind of with the shift in rotations. Eulis sliding in. Now he's coming in as more of a 6th-man role. 4,600, like it's a 7-game slate, right? If you're trying to get a 3-2 in this thing, I don't mind it. That's not going to really be how I attack it. I'm really looking at Chris Murray and Aaron Eulis. If I'm, playing 2 guys or just Tony Perkins on this side. So what are your thoughts on the Iowa side, and what are you doing with Chris Murray?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Murray's the price king. He comes in at 9K, but I mean, on most slates, a price king is usually kind of into the mid or even high 9Ks, right? So I do think that there's an argument to be made that he might be one of those raw scoring plays that you really need to get into if you want to be competitive on this slate. The other name that you mentioned that's really interesting to me is Aaron Eulis. His price tag is there to where he can really pay off in a number of different ways. But the biggest thing for me, I don't know if you're seeing my screen here, are guys coming off of a donut in terms of points scored. So that's going to keep his ownership nice and low. Interesting way to get into this game and get a little bit of leverage on it, because as you mentioned, this is the highest total on the board. Right now they're sitting at a Ken Pom projection of 147 points. The next closest is 141, and then everyone else is down in the 130s or below. So need to find ways to get into this game. Before we shift over to the Blue Devils, speaking about Chris Murray, do you think he's going to draw a lot of ownership? You think most people are going to kind of have a similar line of thought to the one that I just laid out?
Yeah, I think we're all prisoners of the moment, right? He just almost dropped 70 fantasy points. He's in the highest total. He is the price king. There aren't a ton of studs on this slate. Like, we're gonna talk about it, but I mean, Filipowski on the other side, he's 8,800. He's the next highest priced guy, and you're not really locking in 35 to 38 minutes with Filipowski and just massive rates all over the place. So, yeah, I think he's going to be popular. I think a popular combination is to put Murray with Eulis, honestly. I think that's going to happen a lot. I like putting Murray with Perkins. I don't mind maybe mixing in, something different like McCaffrey and Murray. Because I feel like, once you pay that 9K, if you slot that 3,900 in, right, it makes you feel a whole lot better. You're basically right back to your average salary. So I think it's going to be popular. It's a tough defense they're going against. I mean, Duke's no slouch.
Yeah, not at all. So let's shift over to those Blue Devils. Like I mentioned before, number 15 in the country, they are coming in with a 73-point implied total. Pretty similar profile in terms of their efficiencies. 17th in offensive, 28th in defensive, playing at a much slower pace than these Hawkeyes. So A little bit better on the defensive front. They also tend to slow teams down. You mentioned Filipowski. He is the leading priced tag player among the Blue Devils. So why don't we start there and maybe make a case for paying up to 8.8K for him?
Whew, I don't know if I'm going to do it, man. That's a now game stack, right, where you play Murray and you play Ulis. Like, it makes it a lot easier if you want to slot in someone like Filipowski and Lively. That feels like, getting back to that average salary, right? You talk about Filipowski at 8,800. I mean, yeah, the guy does everything, right? It's just a real tough price to swallow, especially with all the guys that Dukes has, right? Like we know Lively's starting to come on, right? Like, we don't really know if he's going to get that spike in minutes. We still got Ryan Young kind of messing around. Lively also could get into foul trouble. He's 4,500. But man, we saw it the other day, right? In 20 minutes, he's intriguing. What happens when he gets like a Zach Edey treatment? He gets 30 minutes. Like, it feels like he could drop a 35, 40 bomb. We just don't know. We don't think that's going to happen yet, but it feels like later on in the season, that's someone we're definitely going to want to get our hands on, as long as he learns how to play without fouling. But yeah, I mean, it's not bad to slot in Filipowski here, but man, you're choking up almost 40% of your salary playing Murray and Filipowski. So they're really going to have to do major damage, and there's enough value to do it on the slate. So don't mind it. I'm not going to be going there a ton. I don't mind the fact that, someone like Jeremy Roach or even a Mark Mitchell, kind of in that mid-tier for Duke. Roach is 6,800. He's got a 22% usage rate, 23% shot rate, 22% assist rate, even chips in 2% steal rate. I mean, he's the only player on this Duke team that's playing heavy minutes, right? He's the only one averaging over 80% of the minutes. So at 6,800, I feel like he's kind of the guy that I want to attack, because I know the minutes are going to be there. I know he's going to get the shots. I know he can create, right? And it's an up and down game. I feel like this is a good game environment. normally you stare at Jeremy Roach on like larger slates or slates with more games that are in the 140s, and you're like, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to play Jeremy Roach. But, a Jeremy Roach 28 here is a really nice score. Like, we're not going to see this massive total tomorrow. From the leaderboard. So I mean, getting someone like him is definitely on my priority list here. Mitchell, he's kind of like Lively, right? Like, and Whitehead as well. Like, these guys just played. Everyone else, it seems like, plays 20 minutes on this Duke team. So, I feel like if Mitchell got 30 minutes, he could do some major damage. He's real tough on the defensive end, can grab rebounds, putbacks. He's just kind of an animal. Tariq Whitehead, man, 3,600. Like, oh my gosh, this is the same thing we were saying about Lively, right? Like, it feels like at some point they're going to get major minutes because they are some of the top players in the country coming out of high school, right? But when you look at Whitehead, when he's on the floor, I mean, he's got a 25% usage rate, a 30% shot rate. I mean, this guy could really explode in 20 to 25 minutes. It's just, is that going to happen? We saw Lively's ownership at, I think it was 4% last slate. I mean, if you get Lively at 4%, he somehow gets 20 to 25 minutes, he could easily pay 3,600 off with those type of rates. So when you look at Iowa too, like, they're allowing their opponents to just grab offensive boards, which makes me really like Lively even more. And Filipowski, for that matter, like that helps him, obviously. So, Rebracha, he's not the tallest guy in the world. He's not the most athletic guy. And now he's going to go up against two ridiculously athletic bigs. And it could be there for some easy putbacks for, even someone like Mark Mitchell. But Lively and Filipowski should be able to do some damage on the glass here. So it's just really going to be whether or not these guys can stay out of foul trouble. And it'll be interesting to see, like, does John Shire finally let these guys play some minutes? So it's just a large rotation right now for Duke. But I think the guy that I'm really keying in on is Jeremy Roach.
Yeah, that rotation has been a story as old as time with these Duke Blue Devils. And the point that you made about the ability to get their own boards really has me keying in on some of these secondary big men, right? Mark Mitchell, Derek Lively. If they're not going to get a ton of minutes, having a higher likelihood to potentially get a board on their own shot and get a quick putback is a real way to maximize their fantasy score in those limited minutes. I want to stay with these two guys, Derek Lively, Tariq Whitehead. Both of these guys, we're really just waiting for that explosion when they get more run. I mean, when is the point that you think we can potentially see that? And you mentioned Filipowski getting into some foul trouble. Do you think that this maybe profiles as the game where he collects a couple extra fouls and some of these bench players get a bit more run?
Yeah, it'll be interesting how this matches up, right? Because Murray on the other end plays the 4, which is if you're going to play Lively and Filipowski together, I mean, there's no way that Lively. I don't think he's going to. He's athletic enough, but I don't think that's where he starts. He's obviously probably going to be on Rabracha. So Filipowski, not to say he's not athletic, but that's a tough matchup for him. So him getting 2 early fouls, I mean, you can't really project that, right? But there's a chance that could happen. Mark Mitchell is probably going to get the assignment, though. He's more got that dog mentality, more of a defensive-minded player. So. Yeah, I mean, as far as when Lively and Whitehead are going to see these minutes, I mean, I would think for Duke to reach their ceiling this year, like these two guys have to be at the forefront. And we saw it the other day, right? Like Villanova, they're struggling. Well, they have a 5-star guard, Mark Armstrong. It's like just play the kid 30 minutes, like let him learn. So when you get into conference play, these guys are comfortable after 20 games. It feels like maybe Shire. We'll see. There's no point. It's college basketball, right? We never know what these coaches are going to do. If he decides to go large rotation, it is going to be tough for some of these guys to meet their ceiling. But even Lively in 20 minutes and Whitehead in 20 minutes can easily hit 20 fantasy points. So I'm not mad at it.
So we talked about this a little bit with Murray and with Ulyss. This is the top priority game for teams, for players that are building teams around or including Kyle Filipowski. It would seem to me like we're going to see a decent amount of Derek Whitehead stacked up with him, just so you can kind of get that salary offset, like we talked about on the Iowa side of this. Is that going to be kind of a popular pairing? And if so, are you looking to stack either someone else with Whitehead or someone else with Filipowski on the Duke side?
No, I don't necessarily think people are going to play Whitehead because the minutes aren't secure, and you have probably like 6 to 8 guys from 4,700 down that we're going to kind of mention later that probably slot in a little bit better, have better roles that we know are secure and getting a few more minutes, obviously. So I that's why I like Whitehead a lot. It's like if you just told me tomorrow you got 25 minutes, like I would click the button and just hope that 30% shot rate, just hope that he starts knocking down shots, collects a few rebounds, grabs a steal, and all of a sudden you're like, at a 15 fantasy point game already. So yeah, I mean, he's not going to be popular for that matter, but yeah, I mean, I'm going to have my share of him. I'm not going to go bonkers with him. I'll probably have 10 to 15% to see if it happens.
So we will move on to our second game. I mentioned earlier, 2 games on the board that are north of 140 in their total. That second game is number 17 Illinois facing off against the should-be number 1 team in the country, the Texas Longhorns, which are currently ranked at 2. They're carrying 141-point total, 73-68 according to Ken Palm. So let's start with your hometown Horns. Biggest surprise for them, I mean, both of their efficiencies are elite. Right, they're the number 2 ranked team in the country for a reason, 15th and 3rd in offensive and defensive efficiency, respectively. This team is blazing out there, not necessarily in the context of the league overall. They're playing at the 155th tempo in the country. But if you go back to this time last year, even the end of last year, they were deep into the 200s, right? So for them to be playing an average pace of basketball is an absolutely rocket speed for these Texas Longhorns. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with your Horns and who are the players you like on that side.
Yeah, I love that they're playing faster and deep in the 200s, man. They were almost dead last. I think they're like 350th. So it's like play faster. They played faster against Kansas and they won that game. So, that's either here nor there. So we're talking about this year and we're excited, right? I mean, look, the pricing is kind of caught up, and it's similar to what we've seen. That's just why I think Murray is going to be easy to get to because Marcus Carey's 8,200. There's just not really a ceiling. Like Marcus Carr's just not that guy that's going to go out and get 40 fantasy points. Like it's just not going to happen. Tyrese Hunter, I like him a little bit more because you get the savings, and it feels like in big games we saw what he did to Gonzaga. I mean, he just destroyed them. Right, he's got elite defensive ability. He's got a 27% shot rate. Feels like his assist rate is just going to get better. I mean, he's only at 12%, but we know that he can drop dimes. He was a Big 12 Freshman of the Year last year at Iowa State and absolutely was the catalyst to that Sweet 16 run. So he's kind of the guy that I'm keying in on. Timmy Allen, he's going to be tough to play because the minutes just aren't there anymore. Like the big rotation for Texas is I mean, it's tough. You got 5 to 6 guys that are kind of playing these big man minutes. So, even though Allen's rates are okay, like his usage rate's 26%, but his shot rate's only 19%. On 20% assist rate, that's nice. But when you're only playing mid-20s, like at 6,600, that just doesn't really do it for me, right? The guys that I'm really keying in on outside of Hunter, Jabari Rice, he's 4,300. If this guy knocks down a couple of threes, he has an interesting path to get to 20 fantasy points, which would be complete gold on this slate. I mean, his usage rate's in the 20s, shot rate's 20%, assist rate's 21%, can hit threes. I mean, he's kind of that. He's going to close the game. He's that third guard that kind of closes the game here. So he's someone I'm keying in on. Didn't shoot well last game, but I mean, he's a spark off the bench for them and someone that Chris Beard really trusts in the early going. So he's someone that I'm going to have some good exposure to. And then unfortunately, I'm going to have a lot of exposure. Maybe not a lot, but I'm going to have exposure to Brock Cunningham. I mean, I don't care what his rates say. Like, the guy just is diving all over the floor. Like, just 3% block rate, 4% steal rate, but only an 11% usage rate and 11% shot rate. But I mean, he's been over 12 fantasy points in 4 of his 6 games. And Chris Beard loves him. He's just tenacious. He might get thrown out of the game. And he might get some cheap fouls and really not play anywhere near 18 to 20 minutes. But I'm going to take a shot on him. At 3,700, it feels like if he can give me a 15, I'd be completely satisfied with that, and being able to move on and getting someone like Murray, getting someone like Tyrese Hunter, being able to play, Roach, maybe even a Filipowski or maybe 2 of the Iowa studs. So, he's one path to get there, but there's a lot of guys in the range. I don't think he's not going to be popular at all, which is why I do like him for that large field tournament. Because look, it's 1,400 teams, right? 1,400 entrants that we're playing against, right? You got to find the 3 to 4K guys that are 2% owned that could potentially put up a 17 or 18, and you see these other guys put up 14. That's what really sets you apart in some of these deeper tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, look, you need it from a salary relief standpoint, right? So you can get up to some of those top tier players, but specifically with a player like Cunningham, sitting in the mid 3Ks, his specialty being creating those turnovers, getting those blocks and those steals. Doesn't take many of those for him to get back to value on his salary. So
and guess what Illinois' weakness, one of their weaknesses is they're 260th in turnover percentage. So
they turn that ball over a lot, right? Definitely a fun kid to watch, right? Like, watching these games, he definitely looks like he is all over the place on this court. So in his limited minutes, he's got a good path to paying it off. I want to go back to the conversation about Rice. You mentioned him, knocking down a couple of threes. Took 6 attempts in his last game alone, right? So, over the course of time, maybe not, from one game to the next, but if he's going to be shooting 5, 6 threes in any given game, he's got a good chance to get a couple of those in. And at that price tag, each of those threes offers really a really nice bonus to your scoring overall. In terms of the overall composure of your buildup, are you looking to get multiple pieces from this Texas side into the game, or are you really just going to rotate one guy in on most of your builds?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how heavy I stacked the first game that we talked about. It feels like you got to get at least one guy in, maybe 2 guys that I'm keying in on: Tyrese Hunter, Jabari Rice, and Brock Cunningham. Because on the Illinois side, they gotta play a tough defense, man. I don't know how much exposure, and that's not me being a homer, but it's tough. They play a lot of guys, and this is the third ranked defense in the country. So those are the guys that I'm keying on for Texas.
Yeah, homerism aside, right? Ken Palm is a reputable service that is ranking Texas all the way up at number 3 on the defensive side. Texas is actually getting paced up a bit in this game. Illinois coming in 6-2 on the season. Another very strong team, 33rd in offensive efficiency, 12th in defensive efficiency, but playing at the 23rd pace in the country. So Texas is already playing faster this year than they were last year. They're now getting paced up in this game. I do actually like this game to flirt with the over. 141 feels like it's just a bit shy given how effective these teams can be in their respective paces. But Moving back to the Illini, where do your builds start with this team for tomorrow's slate?
Really, there's only 3 guys I'm looking at, and I'm not looking at them very heavily. One guy sticks out. Look, I mean, 8,500 for Terrence Shannon. Like the rates are elite this year. I mean, he's been amazing. A 28% usage rate, 27% shot rate, 23% combined rebounding rate, 22% assist rate, 2% block rate. Like, there's a reason why it's 8,500. But this is a very, very tough Texas defense. And guess who the opposing coach is? It's the coach that he committed to and played underneath. I mean, so you have him and Beard were together at Texas Tech. I would think that Chris Beard knows what Terrence Shannon's weaknesses are. So that's got me a little scared to pay 8,500. Like, why would I pay 8,500 for Terrence Shannon in this awful matchup when you could pay, for Murray, you could pay for Filipowski, and then some of these other guys we're going to talk about a little bit later. It just feels like maybe a mistake here, but maybe that just drags his ownership down. I don't know how many people are going to want to pay 8,500 for him in this matchup. So, if you like the over and it goes to 147, 150, and Shannon can get some things going right, you're going to want him. But it's just, man, there's just not a lot of paths for him getting there. And I would think that Beard is going to be keying on him as well as Coleman Hawkins, because they're kind of the driving force behind this offense, right? And Hawkins, you get the price savings with Hawkins. He's 7,300. It was interesting, right? Like, we didn't know what was going on in the beginning of the year with him, and then all of a sudden he's kind of exploded the last couple of games. He had a 35 burger and then a 48 burger. But again, man, it's a tough opponent. Like, Texas, DeSue and Bishop, Brock Cunningham, Brock Cunningham was guarding Ryan Kalkbrenner the other day and causing him fits. Like, that's just how tough and annoying that guy is. So you don't think that Chris Beard's going to unleash him against Coleman Hawkins? Like, you got another thing coming. So the 7,300, it's a little bit better of a pill to swallow, right, than it is for the 8,500 for Terrence Shannon. But Illinois plays a lot of guys. So when you look at it, like, if I'm going to go with anyone here, probably Hawkins, but I feel a little bit better going to RJ Melendez at 5,200. And even that feels a little weird because his usage rate of this offense is only 19%. He's only got a 20% shot rate. Now, most people are going to click it and they're going to see that he went 31 fantasy points in the most recent back-to-back games here. But when you look at it, he's really gotten there on steals and blocks. So he's not like Brock Cunningham where that's like his thing, right? Like, he's an outside shooter. He's happened to pick up some steals and some blocks here. His price is better than the others. Texas is really good on offense, right? So not turning the ball over as much. 2 tough cards, right? Hunter and Carr, you just coming at you. I don't like a lot for the Illini side. So, if I'm playing 1 or 2 of them, I'm playing Hawkins in a few lineups. I'm playing Melendez in a few lineups, and I may have a Terrence Shannon out of my 20 that I have in the big jam right now. I may play him once, maybe twice if I start to feel real uncomfortable before lock but it's going to be in a game stacking environment. This thing's going to have to go over for these guys to get there.
So I think I might be going a different direction with the Illini, and I want you to either talk me off this ledge or give me ever so much hope to hang on to. I'm kind of worried about Hawkins at 7.3K. I agree that he's going to be popular, right? Like, people want to get into this game. They're probably not going to want to get up to the 8.5K with Shannon. So Hawkins seems like he makes a lot of sense. My concern with him is that his ceiling games are either coming on well above average shooting performances, which is hard to do against the 3rd-ranked defense, or in games where he's dishing out a lot of assists, much like I'm concerned about his his field goal percentage. I'd also be concerned about his teammates' field goal percentage. So those assists might not be going in. So these all feel like things that are kind of chipping away at his ceiling. And in a game where he's going to be maybe the most popular Illini, he feels like a bit more of a fade to me. Am I reading into this, or is that tracking in a kind of logical way?
Yeah, they got a lot of bodies to throw at him too. Like, they got a lot of fouls they can give up. And he's probably going to get some of the Cunningham treatment too. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of his production came in the one game where he triple-doubled in a blowout against the Syracuse zone. So, like, this ain't the Syracuse zone. I promise you that right now. It's going to be pretty tough for them to score in this game environment. So, especially I mean, you just got like defensive stalwarts all over the court for the Texas defense. And it starts with Tyrese Hunter, and then you have these bigs that are tough like Cunningham, Bishop, Dessou. I mean, look, I mean, the other games are in the 120s and the 130s, right? So even if this game comes in at 135, right, it's not terrible. It's just whether or not they can be. These are the guys that can be effective, or it's going to be more of a committee that gets them to 68 points, right? Or if it's going to be concentrated between one and two guys. And I just don't feel like it's going to be concentrated between more than one of these guys. I could see one going off, like one of Shannon or one of Hawkins. There's just no way I see both going off. And Melendez is going to have to make shots and going to have to keep those defensive metrics going for him to even have a chance. But he doesn't have that far to go. Rather, like you would take a 20 from him at 5,200, and I would say you still feel okay about it.
Yeah, I'm tracking along a similar path. I think it's probably just one, of Shannon and Hawkins, and if that's the case, I'll usually err on the one that's going to be, markedly less popular. So I might have a good bit of Shannon tomorrow. I don't know if I like this. We'll talk through it in the Discord and make sure you can keep me from self-sabotaging. But on its face, it's a high-scoring game. If there's someone that's going to be dramatically less popular, that's usually where I go. We'll move to the third game that we want to highlight here. This is a game carrying a 139-point total. We've got James Madison Dukes at the Virginia Cavaliers. Right now, Ken Palm is projecting Virginia to be ahead in this one pretty comfortably, 13-point margin, 76-63. Let's start with the James Madison side. Coming in at 7-2, decent enough, above average in both their offensive and defensive metrics. But really, the thing that jumps off the page is their tempo. These kids are out there running 16th in tempo on the year. So, James Madison, certainly not one of the marquee programs out there in the country. Not a lot of names that are known around the household. So, why don't we break down these Dukes to start?
Yeah, we'll make this one a little bit quicker than we have the last two, right? Because there's a 13-point spread, and it's Virginia, who is elite defensively, kind of like Texas is. And it's kind of like what we just talked about, right? We have this Illinois is this fast-paced team that's going to be taking on this elite defense, and now we have this James Madison Dukes, like fast-paced going up against these Virginia Cavaliers. Tony Bennett, like we're just going to lock you down. That's why Ken Palm barely has you getting over 60 points. And it's tough because the pricing is tough, man. Like you look at these guys like Terrence Edwards, 7,300. 30 fantasy points would be tough for him to get to. More 7,200. He's been 18 fantasy points or under in the last 5 games. So there's just no way I could spend 7,200, 7,300 on these guys. It just seems like you are asking for – you're not even asking for a ceiling game, right? You're asking for the ceiling game against Virginia is 28, it feels like. And that's like you completely balled out. Where I go to is a guy that I really like. And I shouldn't at this price tag. I've just seen him play. And Noah Friedel, like, if I'm playing anybody on this side, it's him. I mean, he should see 30 to 32 minutes. I mean, he can really shoot. I mean, there's a 20% usage rate. There's a 26% shot rate. I get nervous, though, because I feel like he's probably the guy that they want to key in on. I don't know how much I'm going to want on this side. It feels like the Virginia side is where you want because Virginia likes to play slow, and James Madison's not going to want them to play slow. And so that's why Virginia is projected to score over 70 points, which almost never happens, and 76 points at some of their price tags feels a lot better than trying to fit some of these Dukes in who are more expensive on their side. So if I'm playing one guy, it's Noah Friedel. And that's a 5%er.
So it sounds like, at least I'm assuming the answer is no, but elsewhere on this roster, is there anyone that you're taking a look at either as kind of a last guy in or as a place to get salary savings, or are there just flatly better places to go on this slate?
Yeah, I think you want to go over the Virginia side. Like Measy Elfram, you could 6K at forward. I mean, the rates are nice, but it just feels like you're just asking a lot. I want 30 in a tournament from him, and that is just going to be really tough. So when you look at it, like he's 6K, right? Like, I mean, there are guys on the other side that are 6K that are projected to score 13 more points. So I just, yeah, I don't know, man. It's Friday, and that's about it for me.
Yeah, you're looking for 30 from Offerham, and he has yet to get to that total this season. Usually, you don't see guys have their season or career highs against this year's Virginia Cavaliers. So, you mentioned going to other places. Virginia is certainly a good place to go. Let's take a look at the Cavaliers playing. I mean, you've been talking up their defense this whole time, playing an even better brand of offensive basketball, 8th in offensive efficiency compared to 20th in defensive efficiency, but they're playing that 2021 Chris Beard tempo, 361st in the country. So dragging it out, making it really difficult for teams to score, for teams to get up and down the court. But there's some interesting pricing plays here. So what do you like on the Cavaliers side?
Yeah, I mean, this is just how Tony Bennett plays, right? Like, and we talk about it with our guy Jay Heinrich, like one of our green screen members. He one of our contributors, man. Like he hits it on the head every time, right? This is a team that you can lose to a 16 seed in the first round of a tournament, versus a team that can win the national title like they did the year after. Like that's just how Tony Bennett's teams are. But this year, the one thing that's kind of tweaked here, so all 5 starters are back, so they're playing better offensively. Like it's not this like complete, like ugly, like scrappy game. Like these guys can score some points, and it really starts with Reese Beekman. If he's 7,500, yeah, he's got 30 fantasy point upside and more with this pace up. Like, you know, you can get out and run a little bit, fire off some threes. He's got a high assist rate, it's 35%. You know, the usage rates are really kind of spread out with this team outside of Jaden Gardner, who's 6,800. He's just not really getting the minutes. Like he's only played 27 minutes once this year, and I don't get it. It feels like he should be locked in at 30 to 35. That's Tony Bennett. Like he's just going to do his thing. 6,800. Yeah, I'm gonna take my shots, especially because it's just such a good pace, and they're one of the highest implied totals on the slate. Like they are the highest implied total of team implied total on the slate. So I mean, yeah, you got to have some pieces on this team. As weird as it feels, right, to put Virginia guys like a 3-way Virginia just doesn't feel great. But these slide down. These are kind of the guys I like a little bit more. Like E.A. Clark, 6,400. Like you know what you're going to get from him. He's the leader. 30% assist rate, 20% his usage rate. He just plays massive minutes. He's kind of a cash game lock. For what he's going to give you, right? He's just super solid. And he can pick up a steal or two in this type of tempo. So I like him. Amon Franklin, I feel like is a great tournament play because he is a kind of a boomer bust type guy. I mean, he went for almost 40 fantasy points against Baylor, but then he's been under 20 fantasy points in four of the last 6. So it's like I don't really know what to do with Franklin. Like I feel like he's an awesome tournament play in this environment. I don't know if people are going to go there, right? Like a lot of people are going to slide in Clark, Gardner, Beekman. But so I want decent exposure to someone like Franklin, 10%, 15%. See if he can really, maybe even more, really go off in this spot. Isaac McNeely, I think, is the guy that offers the best like salary relief in this environment. Like if this game does blow out, he's going to get a little bit more run. Like he's just not really used in the offense as much, but the shot rate's okay. It's 20%. He's got a 15% usage rate. He's the bare minimum. Like, give me 12 fantasy points, and that allows me to go get Murray, go get Filipowski, go get Bates, go get Young, like some of these other guys that we'll talk about. So when you look at it, it feels like the defensive metrics for Virginia are really going to offer some upside, right? Like, when you look at James Madison, they're 234th in the country in turnover percentage. So it feels like Virginia's going to rack up some steals here. And, yeah, that's going to be giving an even higher ceiling. So we got to get into this team. I'm looking at 2-0, 3-0 stacks, and doesn't feel comfortable, but this is the type of slate that we're looking at.
Man, you said it doesn't feel comfortable, but you're talking about the team that carries the highest team implied total on the slate. And, specifically looking at Armand Franklin, a player that has 6-7x upside, at 6.3K, who's probably not going to be very popular. I mean, these these are a few of my favorite things, right? So I'll definitely underscore Franklin's name on my list. I also want to go back to Clark, right? You mentioned, he's a player that's getting a ton of minutes. For me, like you mentioned, going 2-0 and 3-0 in this game, it almost feels like getting two guys that are kind of right next to each other in terms of their list price, their salary, but also kind of balancing out as steady as you can get with someone that has a lot of volatility into their game. Feels like a sort of texture that I can get behind. Are you kind of following that same line of thinking, or do you think that if I'm going to swing for the fences with Franklin, I need to go to someone that can also get to a similar upside?
No, I love that logic. I fear, though, that these guys get out ahead by 2025 and some of these other guys get a little more run than we're used to seeing. I would love for James Madison to keep this thing close because they're not going to get there even if the game's close, right? Like even if it's a 7 point game with 3 minutes to go, I don't even think these guys are going to hit 4x. Like one might get the 4.5x on the James Madison side, so I still don't think you need them. And that's just going to put all these guys from the Virginia side on the floor for 30 plus minutes, and that'll be fantasy goodness. We're just going to have to see. That's why I'm not going completely crazy on this side. That's why the 2-0s are there. You're saying, like, why don't, if this slate is so, just has the two games at the top and then, these guys with the big blowout, that could happen where you're seeing guys play 25, 28 minutes if they go up, on a start the game 30-10, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the worst case scenario if you're playing a 3-0 in this spot.
Yeah, and it's that worst case scenario is on the range, right? So it's certainly not without its risk. Before we kind of fill in the rest of the player pool here, those of you that are checking in on YouTube, let us know what you think. Hit those like and subscribe buttons and let us know what you think about targeting these three games. If you have any questions about those three games or other players on the slate, definitely drop them in there. We'll get those questions up on the screen and answered before we head out. And while we wait for those, like I mentioned, let's round out the rest of this player pool. Off the top, we both highlighted that there aren't really a whole lot of studs on this slate in particular. So who are some of the other kind of high-priced options that you'll be rotating around tomorrow?
Yeah, when you look at it at the high price, I mean, Manny Bates, like you have to look at him just because he has double upside and shot blocking upside. He's 8,600. Taking on Yale, they're going to have a tough time slowing him down. So he's someone that I don't mind at 8,600. That's kind of that move off Filipowski, maybe to playing a Roach and a Whitehead. Now you slot in Manny Bates with Murray and someone like a Ulyss on that side. Now you're working with some decent salary going into your last 3 or 4 players. Jameer Young, oh man, the price has come up. We were playing him at 6,600 the other day, and he was going off. This is an ugly game against Wisconsin. He's 8,000 now. He's been good. He's been real good. This total 127. I'll have a share too, just because he's been so good. One guy that I'm really looking at, and this is an interesting game, it's the Oklahoma State Sam Houston State game. Sam Houston State, man, they're an interesting team. I'm surprised that it's a 9-point spread. I think they could probably cover that. When you look at it, Ken Palm's got them ranked the 91st team in the country, 39th in defensive efficiency. So there's a lot to like with these guys. They beat Oklahoma 52-51 first game of the year. They beat Utah 65-55, and Utah just beat Arizona. But then they go out and lose by 20 to Nevada. So, that's college basketball, right? You get 2 wins against top 60 teams, and then you lose to, someone like Nevada replacing everyone and their mom. I think this could be a cool game to get into. Qua Grant, he's 7,600. He just does everything for these guys. Oklahoma State's tough defensively, and so he's going to have a tough time at 7,600. So if you can figure out a way to get him in, you feel like he's going to do some things. I don't mind Grant at all, but some of them I have a lot of exposure to is Cisse from Oklahoma State. if the guy just stays out of foul trouble and if he plays 28 to 30 minutes, it's a smash spot for him. He's 7,800. Like the guy just fouls a lot. He gives you block upside. He gives you steal upside. He gives you double type upside. And Sam used to say it's not the biggest team on the planet. Like, they have one guy who plays less than 50% of the minutes that's over 6'7". And so Cisse has a strong chance here to really do some damage if he's not getting into foul trouble. So we've seen it before. I mean, he's dropped 30s and 40s. I mean, so he could do it, but there's some risk to him. But I definitely like him as a higher priced option.
And answered my question before I could even ask it, which was whether or not this matchup lends itself to him staying out of foul trouble. If it's a closer game, it certainly lends him to playing some more minutes. So we'll circle Cisse's name as someone to get into the rotation for sure. Let's look at this mid-tier, kind of that 5K to 7.5K range. Who are some of the guys that you're rotating in there?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at Chucky Hepburn. He was great against Marquette, but this is Maryland and the ugly total in the 120s. He's 7,300. Fire if he shells him if you got multiple lineups. Hakeem Hart, he's 7,000. Playing Wisconsin again, just another ugly game, right? It feels like maybe one guy in that game is going to go 5X. So yeah, that just kind of picking between Hepburn, Hart, those other guys in that game. Yeah, go ahead, right? I'm probably going to do it one every 3 lineups. You know what I mean? When you slide down a little bit further, Lukosius from Butler. That guard forward eligibility is nice. He's 6,500. Shoots a lot of threes. He's in play. I feel like all the Butler guys are 6K now. Like, what happened when they were 4,800 and 5,200 and 5,600? It was a lot easier to play these guys. And another ugly matchup against the Yale team, right? I mean, 132 total. So I don't mind Lukosius a little bit here. One of the better plays on the other side, though, is Matt Noling. I mean, you look at Noling, right? Like, he's the best player. He's their highest usage player on their team. Like 5,400, you got to find some salary relief, right? Like, it's or what is he? Is he 4,800? I can't remember. It's 5,400, yeah.
5,400.
Yes, he's 5,400. He's averaging 27 fantasy points a game. I mean, he's going to play minutes. It's going to give you a little bit of everything, right? I mean, it's not a great matchup against Butler, right? But if he can stay out of foul trouble, like, he is going to be the guy to keep them in the game. So he's someone that I'm going to have exposure to. Probably more than I want, but it's gonna be at least 20%, maybe even more. So I really like the lower end of the mid tier. It just feels like we're gonna pay 7,300 or 7,000 for Hakeem Hart and Hepburn. Like, I'd rather just get to Grant, Cisse, maybe even take a shot at a Jameer Young or even like a McCaffrey from the Iowa game.
Yeah, and with Noling in particular, right? I mean, that Yale game is slated to be relatively close, right? So they're not looking at an atrocious team total. But you mentioned it here a couple of times. We are going to have to find a way to get some salary relief in this game. So who are some of your pay down options to do just that?
Yeah, I think we got to look at Seguin from Wisconsin. He's been good, 4,700. He's in that ugly game environment again. I think we slide back over to Yale though. Like, I think they're like, it's just going to go between Noling and then you got 2 guys here, both guards, right? The 4,600, it's Pulakaitis. Like, I would almost rather take the $1,200 savings and play Mahoney for 3,700 in this matchup, just because you get the price savings and probably the same type of ceiling. It's between those guys and then going back over to the Oklahoma State side against Sam Houston State. Yeah, Bryce Thompson plays a ton of minutes. Is kind of one of their key guys. He's 4,500. Hasn't been great recently. So he's someone I'm looking at big time. And then John Michael Wright, the transfer from High Point, man, he looked really good early this season. He's 4,400 now. It feels like one of those 2 guys between Bryce Thompson and JMW. It feels like one of those guys could get into the 25 to 28 range and really, really open you up here to do some damage here. So The way Oklahoma State really runs is between those two guys and Avery Anderson, but I believe Anderson's like 6,600. So figuring out, plugging and playing each one of these guys in the different lineups like Thompson or Wright, feels like you could really nail something there, because they've shown in the past that they can drop into the mid-20s and high 20s. So, I don't mind both of those guys. I'm taking a shot on them. It feels like Thompson's probably the safer one. He's a little bit better on the defensive end. I think it feels like he does more with creating assists for his teammates and hitting threes. So one of those two guys feels like it's going to make it. And if you want a complete salary reliever in that ugly Maryland game, you can look at Ian Martinez. Like, he's been putting up double-digit fantasy points. He's 3,400. Yeah, it's an ugly slate, right? Like, you just have to figure out which guys can get to that 5X. It feels like you can piece together those one or two guys, get the guys up at the top that are, going to go 4.5 to 5X. That's what's really going to set you up.
Yeah, with Martinez in particular, it looks like his minutes have been walking up over these last full handful of games, but his salary is going the other direction. So those are things that we typically look to identify and exploit. Any closing thoughts on this slate or your approach to it before we head out?
Yeah, I think you really have to attack the Virginia side, and then you have to game stack those two at the top, right? Like, it's a lot easier to do the Duke game, right, because of that heavier total. I think Oklahoma State, I think they're sneaky with some of their guys and their pricing. I want to get into them. Georgia Tech, and just go away from that. Like, the one thing that could happen in that game is if Kario Okindo and Terry Roberts are out, both of them, like Marjoris McBride at 4,200 and Jason Holt at 3,600, they become pretty good value plays. So that's what I'm looking at, and we won't find that out until obviously closer to lock. So sneaking in one or two of those guys. But that's kind of my thoughts on the slate, and we're hoping to take down that top spot this time, man.
Man, that win is coming. Just to kind of put a different shape on that advice across those three games, Iowa and Duke, Illinois and UT, and James Madison and Virginia, how many of your total roster spots are you looking to fill in? Are you looking to have all but maybe one or two come out of those three games and fill in with the rest of the player pool, or is that a little overstated?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the others. I look at probably between 5 and 6 between those three games. Some of them will have between 6 and 7. But there's a little bit to like on that Yale side, especially with Noling and some of the guards. I do like Bates, Lukosius from that Butler team. Kind of scratching off the Georgia Tech side unless we get some news from Georgia. Those guys are out. And then maybe plugging in a piece from the Maryland, Wisconsin, just one. And I really like the Oklahoma State guys, like Cisse as a pay up, and then those two guys at the bottom, Wright and Thompson. It feels like you go 5 to 6 on your heavier builds. You get up to the 6-7 mark. So it'll be fun. Hope it all works out, and we'll look forward to either me or you or someone that's listening to shit this thing.
Yeah, definitely tag both of us. Tag Get Green Screens on Twitter, and let us see how the slate shakes out for you. A lot to like about those three games. A little bit to like about Yale. A little bit to like about Oklahoma State. One of the things that you will like is all of Mike's written work, which is over at drroto.com. Get yourself over there. Get yourself subscribed. Like I mentioned, you can find all of Mike's articles in there. These are some of the most in-depth research articles with regard to college basketball DFS out there that will also get you access to our members-only Discord. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk through my builds and some of my thoughts with Mike in that Discord tomorrow. You also are afforded that same luxury. So get over to drroto.com, get yourself subscribed, get into the Discord, and let's get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.